Serious, teachers, what is the hardest position you have been put in with a student or group of students and what did you do? A student, not one in my regular classes, made a fake Facebook account of me with various jokey implications that I was a pedophile. Had to sit down with the year level coordinator for an incredibly awkward and uncomfortable conversation where I had to explain how it made me feel and listen to the student give me an apology. More than once I had to take one of my third graders to the nurse for a referral because of suicide ideation. I had to visit one of my students in the psych ward after she was committed because she had actually attempted self-harm. Those were the hardest because they were only 8 and 9 and already dealing with so much. Broke my heart. My student teaching rounds. I'm teaching the Greek play Antigone to a class of year 10s. Concerning two Greek sisters, Antigone and the younger, quieter Ismene. Late in the play, a defiant Antigone is sealed in a tomb and hangs herself before she can be rescued. In my class is a girl whose popular older sister hanged herself in her room on a school day afternoon only a year or so beforehand. As a student teacher I had no leeway in teaching something else. Instead, I had to have an awkward talk with the girl before we started the play, and to my relief she accepted the matter like a freaking champ. Still not ideal for someone finding their feet in a classroom to have that extra layer of worry about the content. In 9th grade reading Romeo and Juliet almost didn't happen after 3 suicides that year in the school alone, but the show must go on, so we read it. 1. A student attempted suicide, largely because her mom's boyfriend had been raping her for years. She stopped coming to school, and her classmates asked where she was. I didn't say much. Just that she had transferred. 2. A student dropped her purse, which had a beer in it, breaking the bottle and spilling onto my class floor. 3. Boy asked girl to prom, in front of an audience, perhaps because he thought she would be more likely to say yes. She asked to speak to him outside, one-on-one. She did not say yes. The entire time they were outside, their classmates were whispering to one another. 4. A boyfriend was screaming bloody murder at his girlfriend, right at the end of lunch. Her entire class was waiting outside to be let in. Learning that day was difficult. Throwaway. A student's brother killed both his parents. The kid lost his entire family that night. Obviously that was a horrible situation to deal with for that student. But it was a small town and all my kids were so affected that for days some would just come into my room and lay on the floor and fall asleep. I figured they weren't sleeping at home and if they felt safe enough to sleep in my room then I wasn't going to make them learn content that day. I really do not know how to respond to the first half, but I think the fact that you would let your students sleep in your room is commendable and heartwarming. When a student starts crying in the middle of class because they just got a text about how their friend was just randomly shot to death. Similarly, while I was in school a friend of mine died during school hours and the school had to notify the police about inexplicably losing 50-ish students after 5th period. First year teacher here, but during my student teaching I had 2 kids pushing each other in front of me during passing time. Told them to knock it off, and the one boy pulls back and pulls his goddamn pecker out and helicopters it. They don't train you for that crap in college. Told him to pull it up and head to the office. Later found out he tried to report me for sexual assault. Baptism by fire, I guess. There was a lockdown at my high school due to some gun scare. Procedure is to turn off the lights, close the blinds, lock the doors, huddle in a corner. Every class had a lockdown kit so to speak, which meant a bucket and some toilet paper in case someone had to go. About an hour and a half into this everyone is super calm after the initial panic, but something is wrong with Mr. Anderson. He's visibly uncomfortable and crossing his legs like he needs to pee. 10 minutes later you can see he's sweating. About 5 minutes later he's basically squirming and grabs the bucket. This classroom is pretty small so he goes to the opposite side of the corner. Everyone can see him. Then something happened. He exploded. Explosive diarrhea. In front of about 25 students. Frick that, an hour and a half with nothing. I would've gotten up and gone to the bathroom before taking a crap in front of my class. Right now I have a class of 40 freshmen in a classroom built for 25. I was hired a week into the school year, had never taught the subject, have no lesson plans or syllabus or even read the book, and have been playing catch up ever since. 10 of those freshmen are special education with multiple disabilities. 10 more are in what is called the Now program, which basically means they are multiple time violent offenders. I don't have enough textbooks for everyone. The administration has no idea what they are doing. The online gradebook keeps deleting all records. And, on average, including the kids that aren't special needs or the bad kids, the average reading level for this group of 9th graders is 2nd grade. Holy crap man, I'm sorry. Good luck and I hope everything gets better. Rich parents get lawyers, or are lawyers. I had one lawyer mom come after me over her kid's grade. The school didn't want the trouble, so I told them to change the grade. They don't need my approval. They change grades on the DL anyhow. The joke is on the kid and her mom. That kind of crap will do the opposite of prepare her for life. Toward the end of my first year teaching middle school, at the end of the school day, a physical fight broke out in another classroom between a teacher and a student. The student pinned the teacher down to a desk and hit her repeatedly. The teacher gained her footing and threw some hard punches back at the student, which really messed up her face. Once they both were restrained, the teacher broke free and continued punching the student. Once they got her back under control, they were both taken out of the room. On the teacher's way out, she turned to the class and screamed, "Frick with me if you want to, I'll beat all your asses." The teacher was forced to resign and the student was thrown into jail. I've had a lot of tough conversations in my classroom, but I've never had a harder day than the one following that incident. The kids were 12 years old, crying, and terrified of what their teachers and or peers might do. I pride myself on how well I can foster class discussions around difficult topics, but I struggled keeping my composure and it resulted in a lot of hugs and reassurance from both sides. I'm surprised that only the student went to jail. I work with special needs students. They are all big, hulking teenage boys. I was in the classroom with 6 kids and 2 other TAs. Out of nowhere, one of the kids stands up, punches another kid in the face, and runs out of the room, into the hallway full of other students. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I had to wrangle 5 other kids to safety and call for backup while the other 2 TAs went after the aggressive student, all while not knowing if my co-workers were even going to be able to catch him or if they'd get hurt. It turned out okay. My supervisors were in the classroom within a minute. The student who was punched was fine, and my co-workers caught the student. We did end up having to restrain him on the floor until he could calm down. Though, on a definitely completely unrelated note, I'm looking for a new job. In 2 years of subbing, I am blessed to be full-time now. I worked one day as an aide to a special education class. I have never worked so hard to get paid so little in my life. I think for a lot of us it is the realization that some kids have no chance in this life. We can only help so much and then they move on. They still have crap home lives, parents who don't care or hate them and subject them to all kinds of abuse. They get caught up in the culture that they were brought up in and make the same choices their parents and family made because it is all they know. I don't care if this gets downvoted. In my experience as a teacher, this is a very common trend. My wife is a teacher and she sees it every day as well. People don't realize how important a stable family life is. It supersedes even poverty in terms of the effect on a student's performance. Quite emotionally absent boy who never wrote stories finally wrote a story that detailed how he was going to kill me because he thought I was a lesbian. He wanted to stab me, wrap me in a carpet and then throw me into a river. It was terrifying. Not as terrifying as the next week, when he actually brought in a knife and tried to stab a classmate. I'd reported him after the story, and a colleague who taught him art said he produced the same kind of work she'd seen when teaching murderers in prison. Nothing was done. I'd been teaching less than a year. Got 10 years behind me now and that's still the toughest thing that's happened. Not your conventional teacher, but a flight instructor. The school that I teach at has a contract with a major Chinese airline, so we train their pilots from nothing to multi-engine commercial pilot in about 8 months. I have a Chinese student from the most recent batch that got here about 3 months ago. Most of his class are getting their private certificates right now, but not him. He's terrible. Absolutely horrible. Imo. He has no business in an airplane, but it's my job to teach him. He can't do much of anything without me showing him, even if I've showed him 10 times before. Our last flight, he kept putting the airplane into a spin while trying to do stalls. There's a bit of a language barrier, but it's mostly his ability to learn in that environment. His airline wants him evaluated because he is so far behind and they're pouring money down the drain. It's my call whether he fails and goes back to China next week, or if he gets to stay. I'm responsible for making a decision that could very well ruin his life. Though if he stays and still struggles, it reflects on me as an instructor. Frick. Flunk him. If he gets to fly that airline, he's bound to kill people by crashing that plane. He can't do much of anything without me showing him, even if I've showed him 10 times before. Our last flight, he kept putting the airplane into a spin while trying to do stalls. This should be a big bright red supernova flag right here. They say your first year is the worst. For me it was student teaching. I took over for the most popular teacher and they absolutely hated me. 7th grade BTW. Went to work in tears. Love my job now though. 7th graders are hex spawn. The teachers who lasted the longest teaching 7th and 8th grade were those teachers who got a reputation among the students for being B. Guess it takes a no-nonsense attitude to really deal with kids who are just going into puberty and don't know how to deal with their hormones. I had a student a couple of years ago, 9th grade or so. Family background was chaotic. They were fugitives from a civil war-ridden African country and she was supposed to get the best grades despite only barely speaking the language. There were some situations but there was one when she called me one night. Her family had thrown her out and she had no place to go. I was already in contact with our equivalent to CPS, but she had refused any help so far. When she called I was on the road on my bike and about 30 minutes away from where she was. So I called the police to look for her at the station because she had already tried to kill herself and she was so devastated I was afraid she'd try it again. They found her and after I arrived we took her to an emergency children's home. She wasn't only thrown out, she was beaten. They pulled her extensions out of her hair. She had no proper shoes, no warm clothes and just a bag with some things she could grab. The really hard thing? She went back to her family after a few weeks at the children's home. Then she was at a foster family for some time, and went back to her family. Back and forth, again and again until she was 18. She wasn't able to accept help or trust anyone, and in the end we weren't able to help her at all. We showed her ways to get out of that horrible situation at home and she didn't take them. Stockholm Syndrome is a B. I student taught for a semester before deciding to go into the mental health field instead. My degree is in secondary education though, which strangely helps me in my current job. Classroom control equals group home control. But anyway, I had a student that was pretty clearly cutting himself. His long sleeves slipped once and I noticed it. He denied it was a thing when I quietly asked him about it. I told my mentor teacher and we both went and reported it to the social worker. Luckily she knew him already and said she was due to check up on him anyway so she would slip in an arm check self-harm check without him knowing I had reported it. I was in the clear and he would get the help he needs, so win-win situation. On the first day of student teaching in a middle school, a girl was teabagged in the hallway. Someone ran into the room yelling fight. My cooperating teacher took off, and I was left with a class of kids who didn't know me trying to run out and get in on the action. I planted myself in front of the door and told them to sit back down. They didn't sit, but they stayed in the room. Thankfully an aide came in after a few minutes and got them to sit. We had invited a vegan public speaker to our college as part of our public speaking, critical thinking and humanities curriculum. He was and still is pretty controversial and opens up his speeches with a slaughterhouse video to show animal cruelty. He also is pretty darn abrasive and will openly argue with anyone who disagrees about pure veganism. So he starts to really catch the nerve of an older student and it gets pretty heated in about an audience of 75 students. It escalates to the point where the student gets up and starts to charge the speaker. I ended up stepping out in front of the student to stop him. Also to mention, this guy was easily 6'4" and 250 pounds of muscle. Luckily he saw the do not look eye through his way and ended up turning to leave. Colleagues escort him and the speaker out, so people are freaked out and actually called campus police. So I'm left handling the crowd and eventually managed to calm them down. That was a day I learned I could handle intense pressure and had some leadership skills. That was a day I learned I could handle intense pressure and had some leadership skills. That's some resume booster crap right there. Kid graffitied my car with frick off back to UC. National racist words left to imagination. I left teaching in the end because of total refusal to act on the vandalism by senior management. Witnessing abuse and having no means of helping the child is pretty rough. We can call CPS every day. I do. And nothing happens. I really believe laws granting parents rights over their children are far too strong. Former middle school teacher here. I had a kid who was well known for having all kinds of behavior issues because of home life and mental illness issues. I tried working with him a lot. He started calling me mom and would come to my classroom to escape getting in trouble in other classrooms. No one, teachers or other kids, knew what to do with the poor guy, but we tried our best. He came in one day acting a little different than usual, less goofy, darker, and sure, it was more of an intuition thing. He had visible marks on his arms. He confided in one of his teachers very casually that sure, he got beat bad again last night. No idea what happened after that since the rest of his teachers were not informed, but life went on as usual. His team of teachers were not included at all with whatever they were doing to help him, if there was even a they. It was not the only case of this that I experienced. And then I had to convince these and other students that learning about things like cell division and state and local testing was worth their time, and that I was worth listening to during back-to-back 90-minute classes. The only power as a teacher you have is what you can do with your own students within the crap framework that we have in US education. It is emotionally draining and depressing and puts life in a whole different perspective. I decided I couldn't be a part of a system like that and now work in a non-profit organization that provides supplemental educational programming to local schools, programs, and individual kids. I still get to do what I love to do outside of the framework and in a way that supports the professionals who are in the classroom. Money might not solve our problems in education, but we haven't tried. A couple of weeks ago, I tackled a 6th grader who was humping on a girl with a set of brass knuckles. I didn't think about it pre or mid jump, but when he and I hit the ground, my first thought was frick, I'm going to get fired for assaulting a student. My second thought was, is he trying to freaking bite me? And yes, he was. Anyway, didn't get fired. Got extensively thanked by the girl's parents. Administration did a brief explain what happened so we can cover our asses and say we met about this meeting and then bought me lunch. But up until the "it's okay, we're not going to fire you, you were justified" comment from my principal, I was convinced that I had flushed my job down the toilet. I've had a student tell me she had been raped. I reported it to our social worker and principal, but neither reported it to the authorities. I told the girl to tell her parents, but it ate at me all afternoon. I ended up getting her mom's number from another teacher and called and told her. Of course the girl hadn't told her and it was a hard conversation. I was contacted by the police a few days later, but I don't know what came of it all. I was in a similar situation. Her mom already knew and had already alerted the school. She later told me that I wasn't the only teacher she told, but that I was the only one who believed and supported her. It was that last bit of information that shattered my heart the most. My first year of teaching, a fist fight broke out in my classroom between two strong young men. I screamed and jumped in the middle. Luckily they stopped and I was not injured. After I was talked to by the senior teacher next door to me, who told me how lucky I was because one kid had a knife. Very scary. I teach special ed kindergarten and most of my class would do well in a mainstream setting. However, I see special ed as a throwaway class for those challenging kids who are bored in general ed settings. Happy for me, the small class size allows me to challenge my students as I meet them where they need to be. The challenging behavior diminishes once I show how I respect their intelligence. During an art project this last week, I had a 5th grade student wrap yarn around his neck multiple times super tight. The student was sitting to the right of me and out of my immediate eyesight. I was showing the class how to do something when all of a sudden the rest of the class started pointing and yelling at me. I turned and saw another student working to get the yarn off while the kid was trying to bat his hands away. The other kid got it off as soon as I was able to run over to where he was, and when I asked him what happened, He was crying and telling me about how he wanted to die and that his life was crappy and he hated it. I had no idea what to do, so I talked to him and calmed him down a little, then had another student escort him down to the office to talk to the school psychologist. Scariest thing I have ever had to deal with so far. He came back about a half hour later and acted as if nothing had happened. 1. Caught students selling drugs in class, in one of my storerooms, turned them into the administration, and was told not to worry about it as they were buddies of the vice principal. 2. Students caught cheating on each other, and failed both students. Parents came in and demanded I change their grades while having multiple administrators in on the meeting. I was informed that failing them would be detrimental to their college career and that failing them is not the proper reaction. It was clearly outlined in the policies and procedures to fail them if they cheat. 3. Chaperoned a group of students overseas. On our return flight, the teacher, keeping all the passports, documents, and parents' call list, abandoned our group and ran through customs after a delayed flight. He did this because he had a test that he needed to get back home for tomorrow. We missed our connecting flight and had to pick up another one the next day. The other chaperone and myself were still trying to round up all the kids and had to pay for hotel rooms and dinner out our pocket. We got talked to by administration and the teacher that abandoned us made out fine and is still teaching there last I knew. 4. Student on my team was struck in public by their parent at an event for misbehaving. Reported this to the administration as I was supposed. Told not to worry about it. Parents then proceeded to make my life heck the rest of the year. I have more, but these are the direct ones from teaching. This was also not a inner city school, but a magnet school that students fought to get into. Needless to say, I no longer teach and I don't miss it after having to deal with the events that went down at that school. I'm a 1-to-1 in a class and I've got to say I've got new stories every single week. 4 years ago my student was graduating elementary school and we were sitting in the gym for a slideshow with all the Gen Ed graduating kids and all of their parents. Myself, a co-worker and put 2 students were up front because it was the best vantage point to escape if we needed to. Side door, back doors were super crowded with parents and such. Anyway, a parent tripped over the projector plug which came out of the socket and turned off the slideshow. My co-worker bent down to pick it up and plug it back in when my student jumped out of his chair, grabbed her by her shoulders and started humping her. It was, I'm sure, a mortifying moment if we were alone in a room. This was a room with several dozen family members of other students looking on. A strange and unpopular kid stated, apropos of nothing, middle of class, that his dad beats him with a belt. We are mandated reporters. Something like this has to be reported to the state in 36 hours or we can end up in jail. I look at the kid, asking him to repeat his words, taking him aside, getting the details I need to call it in. Of course, I call it in. Don't hear anything else about it. But about a month later, the kid's big sister comes in and asks if she can take him outside for a chat. They go into the hallway. I can't hear them, but the sister is glaring and low talking at him and he's shrugging and shaking his head. The very epitome of IDGAF about ruining someone's life by accusing him of a crime. And yes, I would do the same thing again, 100 times out of 100. But, man, every time he pokes his head in to wave and try to get me to be friendly, I almost shudder and wonder who's next. Taught at a high-risk behavioral school hospital. It's the kind of place where they show you how to use a defibrillator as a life-saving device and a weapon. First day of class, a fight spills into my classroom. 2 boys beating the living heck out of each other. One grabs a fire extinguisher and hits the other in the head with it, then sprays him with it, and as he's screaming about being blind, he gets thrown down some stairs. I had no idea how to handle that situation even though I was fresh off of training. When I taught 2nd grade, I was having students make flowers for their moms for Mother's Day. One student wrote dad on her cup but I said to put mom and got her a new one. I tried to tell her that it was for Mother's Day and that you make it for your mom. Then she said I don't have a mom. I felt like absolute crap and told her it was okay to put dad. A girl kept calling me butt cause I have a butt chin. I told her to stop. I told her again. Then I told her to shut up. Then I told her to shut the frick up. She's in 2nd grade and I'm an English teacher in Korea. I realized how stupid this was and walked away. When I was on my first practical, the vice principal asked me to take the class unsupervised for an afternoon as they could not find a relief teacher. It went okay for the most part, however. The list of tasks that they gave me was pretty short and I ran out of stuff to do with the students with about an hour left in the day. So I had the students play silent ball for an hour. I couldn't think of anything else. Some of the boys got a bit rowdy and one kid ended up in tears. I tried to talk to him about it, but it didn't make him feel any better. I felt pretty horrible afterwards. A student of mine was murdered. Later that year, another family had a murder-suicide between the dad and mom. I had two of the daughters in class. I went to the funeral. It was really horrible. Mom was there. Dad wasn't. Kids lost both parents due to the stupid selfish act of the dad. Special ed kid was spitting marshmallows everywhere. Got them from a good kid and on me. Then he thought it'd be fun to run on the desks. He didn't think it was funny when I pulled his butt down. Cried assault. Dad and mom came up to school, confronted me when I was on duty outside. They tried to threaten me. I cut them off, told them to frick themselves in front of faculty and staff. Quit, got convinced to not quit, kept my job, got second best results in school. School went from worst in big district to best of worst in district. I work in the country now but miss the little savages I used to teach. They had reasons for their fricked up nature and the school was fricked for real reasons. I'm probably done with teaching this year or next. Tired of dealing with incompetence from Washington down to the local level. Tired of seeing crime covered up. Tired of seeing crap heads rob other kids of the education they want, need, and deserve. Kids run schools now. It's all about positive reinforcement with no punishment unless you have drugs or weapons. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.